Welcome to today's webinar. Our panelists today include Dr. Kyley Dickson. He's the Associate Director for the Center for Athletic Field Safety at the University of Tennessee. We also have Jody Gill. He's the Superintendent at Creekside Baseball Park. And finally, we have Kennie Holmes, Superintendent at Home Field Baseball Park. Thank you for being here, panelists.
Thank you.
Share my screen. We'll get started. Right.
All right. Well, we're excited to talk to everybody today about one of the talks we're going to get at SFMA coming up, and it's been a really exciting talk and topic. I work at the University of Tennessee, as Jennifer was alluding to, and we do a lot of different research on synthetics and natural grass and comparing the two and kind of seeing that. And one of the things that came out from a lot of the research we do was like, do synthetic turf, do they need maintenance or are they maintenance free? Because a lot of the people that were starting to use them in our area in Tennessee were thinking a lot of them were maintenance free and they didn't have to do anything. They just put them in and walk away. So that was one of the things we were trying to look at. You can see some of the plots here on the screen. We've got a lot of 15-foot by 30-foot plots. We've got natural and synthetic. We've got different types of infills for these synthetic ones, whether they're an organic base, so like a Brockville is one, or they're a coconut husk, or lots of different things that people are using now. We've looked at that. We're looking at the rubber-based infills, the traditional crumb rubber, different particle sizes. So one of those things we wanted to look at was the maintenance. Like, did it make a big difference if you did a maintenance or if you didn't? And kind of how do those particle sizes, do they make a difference? If we add infill depth, like all these different combinations, they seem like they were important, and we wanted to kind of know more about it. So here at the University of Tennessee, we have something called the University of Athletic Field Safety, and this is a lot of this, like where this research that I'm going to talk about kind of comes from. But some of this research, I was talking last year at the SFMA conference, which I'm excited to see everybody at this year. Jody and Kennie were in my talk, and they came up and they had a great idea of like doing some live research about what's going on in the actual real world. And then I do a lot of simulated stuff as far as simulating games. And we're trying to kind of see if we came to the same conclusion. And that's kind of where we got to with this PowerPoint. I'm excited to share it with you. So the next slide, please. So one of the studies that I was doing, you can go ahead and get all of them on there. There we go. We were looking at if you did maintenance or if you didn't do maintenance, and basically just not to get into the whole talk, but just a little bit about it. If the surface hardness and the infill depth were correlated, so if we lost infill, we got a harder surface. HIC is something called head injury criteria, and if we were to do maintenance of some kind, we reduce that in the surface hardness. We were able to decompact the surface. We reduced the hardness of it. We were able to keep going. And then as we replaced the infill that had been migrated out, we lost due to traffic during kind of my thing, like the simulated traffic events, we were able to get it close to the original specifications. And from what I've been trying to do, like from a research perspective, is keep it as close to those original specifications and then see kind of how does it perform if you maintain it as you keep going. So the next slide, please. From looking at that, we went, this is a Division I athletic field. I went and tested. And if you look at this as a heat map, and so anything that you see that's the darker red is too much rubber, anything that you see that's white is not enough, anything that's pink is kind of right where you're wanting it to be. And so this field is supposed to have 32 millimeters of rubber in it, and we went and we did a heat map. And so a heat map is taking a lot of points, taking those points, put them into a software package. It shows kind of like areas that are high or areas that are low. And this was showing us that we had some it's a very variable area of the field, but you go look at it and it seems like it's just perfect. As you look at the field, it looks like there's, it looks very uniform because you have all the grass. Because with a natural grass field, you can walk up and see it, and you can be like, oh, it's worn in this area. Where when you're looking at synthetic turf, a lot of times you can't do that. And some of these areas have something that's correlated to why they look the way they do. The area that starts at the 20 and goes down to the 30-yard line on the left side of the field, that is where the track team was running. So they would come in and run sprints there. The very top in the middle, that's where the soccer team would come and warm up every time. And then there's an area that kind of cuts across the middle of the field, kind of about the 20 on the right side and goes down to the bottom. And that's where players were going. They were just cutting across to get to the cafeteria. So, not even use of the field, but there's a lot of wear happening that you don't even realize. So next slide, please. And so one of the things that we look at not only with maintaining the surfaces, are we preventing injury and are the athletes able to perform? We want them to be able to perform at the highest level possible. That's, that's one of the goals of this, but we really want them to be safe. And so safety and performance are a lot of those things we're looking at. We're thinking about the athlete. How is that athlete to surface interaction really changing? It's something kind of we talk about in this as we get, in more in depth into this talk at SFMA. But this is one of those two criteria that we're really trying to pay attention to: is can that player, is it safe for the player, or safer if we can make it safer, and can they perform well? The next slide, please. And so what they wear on the surface, does it make a difference? You got on the left, you have Earl Campbell wearing those turf shoes. But today, if you watch, that picture on the right, Ezekiel Elliott, some guy from the Lions, they are wearing very aggressive cleats that you'd see them. They wear the same cleats on natural turf and synthetic. And does that make a big difference? Got some interesting things to talk about with that, but it definitely seems like it could make a huge difference on how these synthetic turfs are going and kind of how it is. So next slide, please. I think with that, I'll turn it over to Kenny. Or Jody, which one? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll take over first. I'm Jody Gill, superintendent of Creekside Baseball Park. But before we start, I think we need to honor Jennifer's glasses collection and try and one-up her, but I don't think that's possible. So I thought we'd make sure that we appreciate your glasses, Jennifer.
You can try. I don't know.
Good job. So Creekside Baseball Park opened in spring of 2020, built by a local developer. And then PBR KC purchased Creekside Park. And a little background on PBR. Kenny and I both work for Prep Baseball Report. That is a company that keeps stats on players and makes connections for players in baseball to get them college scholarships, major league contracts, whatever they're looking for. And we have scouts in every state of the country that work for PBR. So the division of PBR we work for is called Prep Baseball Tournaments, and we run the Kansas City division. PBR has complexes in other states, other cities. There's Grand Park in Indianapolis. There's Lake Point in Atlanta. There's Lumberyard in New York, and Championship Park in Kokomo, Indiana. And so our Kansas City division comprises two complexes, Creekside being one of them. We are a private for-profit entity, which is unusual in this business because a lot of these ballparks are municipal owned. And in my days in public service, I was dealing with synthetic football fields, but I had never dealt with synthetic baseball infields. All of my experience was dirt and natural grass infields. So this was definitely a step out of my comfort zone. But since I'd never dealt with them, I wanted to learn more about them. And these synthetic baseball fields are going in everywhere. And we're both convinced that people don't realize what they're getting themselves into. So as a private entity, we make money by playing games, and that's what it's all about. So you've got PBR that's maintaining these stats on players, so they need the opportunity to show their skills. So we run tournaments, and boy, do we run a lot of tournaments. This is a tournament-only facility. Last year we played 4,700 games. But that equates to, we have to do some math, and I'm not very good at it. So we work together on math, and that comes out to 785 games per field, which is unheard of. Again, I think there may be a few facilities that play that many, but my experience in the public entity in a school district, if we played 785 games in the life of the field, that was unusual. So this was kind of a natural marriage here, getting together with Dr. Dickson's data to collect some additional data. So next slide, please, Jennifer. We're opening a new park. Matter of fact, construction was just completed. It's called Home Field. We don't own this park, but we have a long-term lease on this park. PBR does. So again, private company, tournament facility only. We expect to play 6,000 games in this 8-field complex this next year. It's just a few miles from Creekside, and it's near an entertainment hub. We've got Kansas Speedway. We've got Sporting Kansas City Stadium, Kansas City Monarchs, minor league baseball, Along with this development, we're going to have a Margaritaville Resort and Water Park that's nearby. So the intent of this company is to bring teams in to play tournaments and give them an entertainment mecca. So it becomes a destination. So that's the way we work, and I think that's the reason we play so many games. Next slide, please, Jennifer. So, as Kyley said last year at the conference, Kenny and I sat in on his presentation, primarily because, again, I mentioned that our experience with synthetic turf infields was limited. And I've been on a lot of football fields, but not on baseball infields. And his presentation really sparked our interest, especially this photo that you see that I stole from him. When he's doing all this research on synthetic turf, and he stressed the fact that it was the traffic he was producing was simulated. So Kenny and I, our first thought was, you know what, we can give you a lot more traffic that is not simulated. And so we talked to him afterwards, and I think we all, the light went off. We thought, hey, I think we can get together here and put together some data that people can really use. So that next bullet on that slide, I just want to read that. So since we play so many games and cause significant wear, we wanted to find a way to predict severe wear by quantifying the negative impacts to the field caused by proper use of the field. I want to stress proper. So these baseball fields we're building, we're using them as intended, and we are beating the heck out of them because we play so many games. We have so much traffic. And that was the real shock to me after coming from football, where football spreads the wear pretty much for the most part. There's more wear between the hash marks and between the 20s, but it spreads the wear. I remember the first impact to a football field that was really shocking to me, 15 years ago, was when lacrosse grew in popularity. And we started allowing lacrosse teams to use synthetic turf fields in the stadiums. And that lacrosse crease was getting pounded. And we learned the hard way that lacrosse crease area, which is just a 10-foot diameter circle at usually around both 20-yard lines, has intense traffic. And if we're not adding rubber and standing up those fibers every day, then the fiber loss was pretty intense in those areas. And I say we learned the hard way. We literally had to swap out carpets. So we would go to the D zone of the football field, behind the goalpost, and cut that 10-foot circle out and swap that crease zone on the field of play, so that we could maintain enough fiber there to hold enough rubber to maintain proper Gmax readings. So coming into the baseball world with synthetic turf, it was that on steroids. So Kenny's going to get into the individual, the wear that you see and how we tested that wear. But I do want to say that when we entered this project with Kyley, we discussed, well, do we do Gmax readings to gauge the wear, or do we just use infill depth? And as he said earlier, really the two are interrelated. So if you've got enough fiber to hold enough rubber, then your Gmax ratings are going to be lower. You're going to have more impact attenuation. But once that fiber starts wearing to the point you can't hold much rubber, then your Gmax readings start to go up rapidly, indicating a much harder field. In baseball, while Gmax is important, it's not as critical as it is in football. Football's contact sport, head impact is expected, but in baseball, impact with the ground and the head is not expected. It's not doesn't happen very often. So in baseball, you are looking more for how the ball plays. If you try and play baseball on a football field with a 165 Gmax, then chances are that ball is going to die. It's not going to have the bounce is not going to be like it is on dirt. And so in baseball, it's more important that we look at infield depth as opposed to Gmax. And so our project began, we decided we would just use infill depth as our criteria. And so Kyley sent us a tool that we lovingly call Spike. So if you can imagine, I think he said his engineering school or somebody developed the tool. Imagine a hydraulic cylinder intended for a tow truck that's got a slide in the middle of it and 3 spikes at the end, and then a high-tech device that reads depth. So that's pretty much a spike. So it's measuring the depth of the infill in the carpet. And the reason we wanted to use a tool like that is as we gathered this data over the last year, we wanted to be sure that we were using the same tool and the same methods to collect this data. So we did this on a regular basis. So I'm going to let Kennie get into some of the why, some of the hows, how we went about this, and so on. And sometimes I hesitate to introduce Kennie as an umpire, but I will. And the only reason is, and he is a college umpire, but people tune into webinars because they want to hear accurate information. Well, as an umpire, you're usually wrong.
We give accurate information.
Okay, we'll leave it at that. Next slide, please, Deborah.
As you can see in this slide, what we did was we determined, kind of like what Jody talked about, the spot specific areas of our infield. If the second base slide pit is not properly maintained, if the batter's boxes are not properly maintained, if the mounds are not properly maintained, and what we determined in the order of use and wear, starting from the mound, the actual rubber where the cleat turns, grinds, the landing area where the pitcher's foot goes. Pitchers are taught to step straight at the plate. Left-handed, right-handed pitchers, it doesn't matter. Their foot's going to stand in that same place plus or minus 2 inches. So that constant wear, that right or left-handed batter's box where the foot is the anchor and the pivot foot of where it twists. The catcher boxes seem to be as much because of the way a catcher squats down, the way his cleats on the towards the toes are twisting, and he's working hard back behind the plate. Then we go into the first base area where the first baseman is making constant footwear around the bag, his footwork on a bunt, a pickoff throw, holding a runner. Second base, the sliding pit. You can see in the picture here, we're taking readings at what we call the sliding pit. You can see the shiny area where all of the turf or the rubber has been displaced, and you can see the spray pattern of where it goes. We determined the lowest point from the second base is right around that 6 foot 6 inch mark, and that's probably where the player's hip hits, and it's just a constant pounding on the 6 fields that we have. That was plus or minus 1 or 2 inches. So the consistency thing that we're seeing was kind of a surprising factor for us as well. Like I say, the mounds and the tabletops, what we do is, because we are a private entity, we do what we do to try to maximize the length of our fields. We don't have the money to be replacing fields as many games as we play. Probably 3 years, maybe 4 years. Well, we're going into our 4th year at this particular ballpark, and we think that what we've done by identifying these particular areas and using Spike as a data collection point, we are able to predict in the future what the wear is going to look like and how to prevent that. And we'll be able to give data to people. I know administration like to put in these fields and they think, well, it's maintenance free. We'll just knock our maintenance staff from 5 people down to 2 because you don't need it. It's actually as much work on a different direction. Your sliding pit at second base on a dirt field is the same way. You can't just drag over the top of it and it go back to normal. You've got to actually do some work to get that in. So we collected data from 12-year-old to college level ball players, maybe 80-pound second baseman and a 12-year-old to a 220-pound first baseman at a collegiate level, stealing second base, turning the cleats in the batter's boxes. And those are some of the things. We did collection after a specific game. We've done collection after a specific inning. We actually called timeout, went out between the innings, and took infield readings right there at second base. Pitchers asking, what's going on? What are you doing out here? Just keep throwing, son. We'll take care of this. So we try to use a wide range of criteria to fill in as much of a graph as we can, and we'll share that with you in January. If we can go to the next slide. You can see the picture on the left is after a collegiate level game, how much rubber was displaced. You can see that shiny area from the previous slide. If you look at the fibers, this is probably somewhere between a 5 and an 8 millimeter loss as far as the height and the depth of rubber that was sprayed beyond second base, to the left of it, to the right. And you can see, if you look closely at the fibers of the actual turf, how it's frayed. And that's what we try to avoid. That's what we are trying to prevent. The picture on the right is after we call intensive maintenance. We have maybe a 4-step process that we do to bring it back up as close to new as we can. If you can go to the next slide, please. These 4 pictures are kind of showing where we start from. The one on the left, you can see the shiny area in front of second base. That is our sliding pit. The fibers are tilted towards second base, and if it's not maintained, it will continue to go that way, and it'll be harder over a period of time to bring those back upright where they should be. The second picture, we use a power broom, and we kind of stand those fibers back up. You can see the difference in the color of the texture. The third picture you can see is adding crumb rubber back, and that's one of our criteria that we found. We can't just use a lawn and leaf rake. We tried that. All it does is basically top dress what we're trying to accomplish, and it doesn't do it. The power broom, it's more aggressive. It does displace rubber that's still there, but at the same time, it stands the fibers up like we need it to do. When we add rubber back in, it's where it should be. Instead of the fibers being laid down, adding rubber, that's not a natural playing surface. That's not what we're trying to get.
You just put rubber on top of a laid down fiber, if that's the case.
Yeah, it's not worth anything. It's not worth the effort. And the picture on the right is kind of what we've done after our 4-step process. We've done a power broom to stand the fibers up. We've added infield. We've used the lawn and leaf rake to kind of top dress everything back together, and we've used a groomer. So the process from the specific spot out to the area was our goal, and that's just what we do at the second base area. Do we have the next slide, please?
One thing I want to point out too, Kenny, real quick, is that previous slide, we made a point to collect data every step of the way, and with different levels and methods of maintenance. So we would collect infield depths post game. We would do a lowest level of maintenance, then collect infield depth on that level of maintenance, use the brushes, add the rubber, and we collected data along the way. And those are the data points that we want to talk about in January. I think it's going to be very informative, and will give people the ammunition they need to prove to their superiors, to whoever they work for, that these carbon infields need work. I would argue they need as much work as a dirt infield.
Yeah,
it's just in a different way.
The biggest difference is we play baseball as soon as it stops raining to get the number of games that we do. This particular set of slides, you can see what we've done. We noticed at first base, our depth was not where we needed it to be. The fibers had worn down to a point where the rubber was not going into the fibers anymore. It was sitting still. It was just kind of being scratched around in an area and you could just kick it with your foot, just the top of your foot. So what we decided to do was kind of use Jody's method of taking from a specific area, the center bottom picture. What we did was we swapped with a warning track area. The reason why we did that, several reasons. One, I guess the biggest thing, and it's all about money. We being a private entity, we have to pay for our own things. What we found was they don't make our particular height of carpet. This is a 1 1/8 inch pile. They make an 1 1/4 pile now, and it's going to be a different color. So we would look like we had fuzzy first base area, and that's not what we wanted. So that's why we did what we did. First, for the look, second, for the cost that's involved in it. We take our area on first base, we take it to the warning track, we cut our exact measure, and we just swap it. We glue it back down just like people installing AstroTurf does. As you can see in the top right picture, it's Rusty approved. That is our Creekside motto dog.
He's still waiting for you to throw the ball.
And the ball is on the right. He will sit there all day until that ball is picked up and thrown. So that's one of the things. I guess what we would talk about more in depth. Sorry, Jody.
That's okay.
Mr. Gill. We'll talk about more in depth in Florida at Daytona is keeping the cost down of what we do as a private versus public. We hope to show you that what we do on a 700+ game year may be 2 or 3 years of your particular field. But if we can give you the data of we played this many games, we've got this number, we forecast this many games, this is what's going to happen if we don't prepare for a replacement or the machine that I need in order to bring this back to new like condition, to a safe condition. That's the number one key. It's the safety for the student athlete. And we'll be able to give you more detailed information at the conference, and that's what we're looking for. I guess I'm going to turn it back to Jody and Kyley if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, just one quick point too is that, like Kenny was saying, all my years in public service, everything had to be justified, everything had to be backed up, and so many times, if you don't have data to back up what you're saying, let's say, for example, you've got to go to the city council or school board or whoever you answer to replace a field or replace a section of the field, and you need the money added to your budget to do that. You're not going to be successful if you go to that group and say, my gut feeling is this is what's going to happen. So our whole point was to collect infield data in these varying situations and put that into a format that you can use to go to your entity and tell them, hey, based on this data I've collected, I predict that we're going to have some issues here at the end of this year or next year, whenever that is. And it all starts with anybody maintaining synthetic turf needs to have an infield depth gauge. That's the number one tool. It doesn't have to be the spike from the University of Tennessee, but they make smaller versions that are very, very inexpensive. And I think Kyley would reiterate that as well, that's the most valuable tool you can have aside from maintenance equipment to maintain these carpets. And another point I want to make too is one thing I've learned since getting involved in synthetic turf, and a lot of my peers know I've always been a natural grass guy, and I'm sure a lot of people are shocked to know I'm working with synthetic turf. And yeah, I know I've gone to the dark side, but I wanted to learn more about baseball. I can tell you that these synthetic infields don't save you money. They save you time. And I mean, time in a tournament. So, Kenny said we're playing so many games that when it rains and it stops raining, we need to play right now. That brings up another challenge with our natural grass outfields, but that's a whole nother story. But it's important that we get back to playing very quickly. So that's what I think that's the important factor you have to consider when you are talking about putting these things in. Again, they're not going to save you money, but they're going to save you time if you manage them properly anyway. So we are open to questions or any comments, Kyley, you might have.
I think you guys did great. My big thing is the infield depth gauge. I completely agree, and you can make that for as cheap as a nail, and you can make marks on a nail if you don't have any budget at all. Most people could find a nail or something you could stick into the surface, or a pencil or something like that. You can check your infield depth with just about anything. It doesn't have to be a very expensive tool at all. If nothing else, find something to check the depth of the infill on your synthetic field. It'll increase the life tremendously if you just were able to try to maintain that. Just if nothing else, an infill depth gauge.
Thank you, panelists. Very good information. We will open it up for Q&A in just a bit. But once again, this is synthetic baseball infields, research, and real game impacts. It will be featured in Daytona at our conference on Tuesday, January 23rd from 3:30 to 5 p.m. If anyone has any questions, the chat is open. Panelists, can you see the chat?
I can, yeah. So this is a question, I guess, for Jody and Kenny. Are the players allowed to wear metal cleats on the surface?
It's a great question. We don't allow it, but there are some college teams who roll into town and they didn't get the message, and all they have are metal cleats. We do fine teams $500 if they wear metal cleats. So some of them will just pay the fine and play the game. And we look at it as, if you're constantly wearing metal cleats, it's going to be more impactful to the field. But the occasional game with spikes, it's not going to impact it too much. So we try to control it that way. You really shouldn't, I don't think, wear metal cleats, especially pitchers on synthetic mounds. Pitchers can really do some damage pretty quick.
Well, and that kind of goes, we can throw that one back to Kyley, that you talk about a portion of your program. You talk about the grip, the difference in the Earl Campbell cleats and the ones that Ezekiel Elliott was throwing. That can be, I think you could be able to answer that in Daytona.
We've done some testing for some
point.
professional MLS or Major League Baseball teams, and we tried metal versus rubber cleats, and it was insane on synthetic turf how much extra traction you had. There's one division, baseball team that is very, we've kind of were tracking. They have a dirt mound and the rest of it's synthetic, and they had 6 pitchers tear their ACL coming off the mound because they were catching, because they were used to the dirt, and then they came off in the synthetic and they had so much more traction. So it can be a pretty dangerous thing to wear those metal cleats, but a lot of those guys won't. They want to wear them. So it's but yeah, it's been interesting from that perspective. Jody, can you guys see those now?
Yeah, I see Mike ask about direction of turf install. Really, that's a factor in our minds more so on the pitching mound and the batters boxes, catchers boxes. So usually turf install is going to be dictated by the installers. We haven't really dictated which way, but it's in the best interest of whoever's installing your turf to pick the direction for the individual sport that's going to make the field last longer. I mean, they have a warranty to uphold, and that's that warranty, while it doesn't cover impacts at first base as much, it's covers more manufacturing issues or installation issues. So they're usually going to design your field and get the best direction. When we're dealing with pitching mounds and replacing the carpet on the pitching mounds, we typically want the fibers laying towards the pitcher, because as they pitch and land, that foot's going to slide slightly downhill. So those fibers are going to get pushed towards home plate. So we're always looking at the direction of wear when choosing direction of turf install. Don asked about how does airborne contaminants affect maintenance. I assume you mean maybe dust or something along those lines.
Cottonwood.
Maybe give us a little more clarification on that, Don. And Noah asked, might be a side topic, are your pitcher's mounds removable or permanent? And if permanent, what is your base material? And We've actually got two different mounds. We just constructed what we call gravel mounds in our bullpens. We took away the temporary portable mounds in the bullpens. So it's an AB3 material with carpet over the top. And all the contact points for the pitchers on the mound, we used an 80-ounce carpet, which is a pretty dense material. That's the same 80-ounce carpet we use in the batter's boxes. They will hold a lot of sand because of the density of the fiber. The mounds on the game fields have to be portable because we play different age groups. We use Perfect Mound, again, the official mound of PBR. And they are 6-section mounds. So they're quite expensive, but they're high quality mounds. They very closely simulate a real mound in size, and it's our job to make them last. Kenny mentioned that pinpoint wear that the pitcher's cleats, they grind into those mounds. So these have replaceable sections of carpet, both on the tabletop and what we call the stride area. But those are very expensive pieces of carpet to get them from the manufacturer. So we do have a process in our shop where we repair those. We take out the worn section, glue in new carpet, and reinstall those on the mounds. And we can, we probably replace those sections twice a year at least.
We can find, so Dawn is following up with leaves, pollen, and other debris.
Leaves.
Yeah,
That's one thing that we're going to deal much more at home field than we do here at Creekside, because we have trees that are planted in between our fields. We are right next to mature trees that are in that 50-75 foot range. So what we try to do is we try to get those off the field as soon as possible, because if they get stepped on, get crushed, get crunched, it doesn't turn into anything that is advantageous to us in our field. It will turn into basically pulp, like when you crunch your leaves at home. It doesn't help us at all being biodegradable. So we try to get those off the field as soon as possible before obviously before they build up or before they deteriorate.
Yeah, I'm lucky at Creekside. I can just blow them into the grass and mow them up. It's wonderful. You're not going to have that luxury.
No.
Carpets and fences.
I need another person on my staff.
Here we go. More money. We have more questions.
Do we have?
Raymond asked, what is the ratio of your infill sand to rubber?
Oh, I got that one.
Okay.
What we try to do, well, we don't go 100% what the manufacturer's recommendation is. And our normal infield that is in our grass area, that is on our infield playing surface, we try to do what they recommend. They recommend 1/3 sand, 1/3 rubber, and then 1/3 of fiber. What we have determined is the spot specific areas, the grind on the mound next to the rubber, the stride, the batter's box is where they pivot. What we try to do is we try to bring that up to about 2/3 of sand, and that creates a very stable ballast, because it's not just sand open on a concrete thing or a desk. It's all locked in with the fibers, and so that protects at least 2/3 of the fibers right there. We dress it with crumb rubber, and what that rubber does, that is the stuff that gets twisted out. The rubber and the stride area, it's probably displaced after 1 inning, maybe even after the warm-up pitches are thrown. And then you still got 6 innings, you've got 7 innings of grind from cleats directly on your fibers. So playing the volume of games that we play, we know it's going to happen. So that's a process that we developed to spot specific, be able to replace those areas. And like we talked about being private, we don't have the money to get an entire area. So we've learned how to break that down into a 12-foot or 12-inch section, a 24 by 24, things like that. But original question is, those heavy traffic areas, we try to go about 2/3 sand, 1/3 rubber, and maintain it that way.
See a lot more questions here that I missed earlier. Just real quick, Mike makes a comment: Oregon State removed rubber and added sand. Batting average went down 10 points. I want to hear more about that, Mike. We got to get together in Daytona. Let's see. Ben asks, are your field slit film or monofilament? They're all monofilament, which is certainly our preferred field. There's another question here: is data being collected on areas adjacent to the wear area, splash area? Wondering if there's concern or impact to performance of areas of excess infield. That's a great question. We have not collected that data because it's pretty clear. I mean, you could see in the pictures as Kenny was presenting, those areas outside the splash area were much darker, indicating, well, there's a lot more rubber there. And I know Kyley has done a lot of research into excess rubber and how that affects play. And in his presentation in January, he'll show you some wonderful slides that are filmed in slow motion video of excess rubber when the ball hits it, both soccer and a baseball, and when a cleat hits it and the player grips and turns. So yes, absolutely, that excess rubber will impact the game. It can make it a little slicker, especially if it's wet, or if you allow our first base areas that got down a little too far, they can get slick too if there's not enough fiber there to hold rubber. Even with a rubber molded cleat, that cleat might not grip on that worn out area. Let's see.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The question here: rubber mats under turf at mound and batter's box. No, we don't have any rubber mats there. The batter's boxes are replaceable, but again, those are 80 ounce per square yard fibers in there, so they're pretty dense, and we can get a full season out of the batter's boxes. Matter of fact, we built the new bullpen mounds, and we used old batter's boxes to create the tabletop and the stride area in the new mounds that we built there. So that is certainly key. So that's going to be some interesting data, because the carpet on our perfect mounds, I would guess, is more of a 40 ounce fiber. I don't know for sure, but it's going to be in that range. So it's going to be interesting to see how that 80 ounce fiber lasts on these bullpen mounds, because they're really going to get pounded. We're looking forward to collecting some data on that. I really think that it's going to increase the life of those practice mounds. I got a question: do you water field for fast ball roll? We do not. Remember, these are shorter fibers in baseball. So even though you might have a 40 ounce or 50 ounce carpet on the field, they are shorter fibers. So that in itself is going to be a denser fiber because they're shorter. Remember, this is measured by weight of fibers within that square yard. So baseball typically has a shorter fibers, and it's we're building it for fast ball roll. We don't want to have to water the field to get a faster ball roll, because again, we don't have time. We're playing 8, 9, 10 games a day. There's very little time between games, so we want them to be a true roll field without adding any water. I'm just reading some more questions. Jennifer, I don't know how long you want to go. Stop us anytime, or we can sit here all day and answer questions.
I'm here for you. I'm here for you.
Over the years, we've had synthetic fields replaced with new synthetic. The rubber on the newer fields have at times held water. Field supplier has applied a surfactant. Is there a change in rubber quality or another reason? Over the years, they've held water.
They should not hold water.
I have to wonder if there's a construction issue.
Yeah, if they're built correctly, they're going to be they're going to be at the proper percentage of fall. They're going to be, your drains are going to be in place. It's got 2 levels of rock that are underneath your material that's laid down. There are actual holes. If you can flip a turf field upside down, there's a pattern of holes that are in the material itself that drain water. So that's concerning of how the field was constructed, in my opinion.
I know years ago in my previous, with my previous employment, before I retired from there, we replaced some football fields. And one thing we noticed on one of these fields is it was not perking. Water percolates through the field and through the gravel. It wasn't perking as fast as it did when it was newer. So before the new carpet went down, we actually hired a lab to come out and do a water perk test where they set up a tray on top of the gravel and they measure how quickly that water penetrates through the gravel. And in this case, it did not. There was a problem with the gravel when the field was built. The surface gravel, the finer gravel, seemed to have fallen apart and plugged up the larger gravel below, and so it was not perking right, and those surfaces had to be replaced. So these fields, when built correctly, that subgrade should be perking, Kyley, correct me if I'm wrong, but 20-30 inches an hour. I mean, that there should not be any standing water. So if a supplier feels like you have to apply surfactant to a field, you might want to get another opinion on that. That doesn't sound right.
So from the crumb rubber that's applied, I've been to a lot of the factories where they manufacture those and kind of seen the process, and they're literally just grinding up car tires. They're taking out the metal contaminants and those other pieces, and they're just grinding them up. If it's sticking to the rubber itself, I've never. It's a very interesting problem to have. If it's that, but if it's not that, it's got to be the drainage. But if it's something happened to the rubber, I would think it's a very interesting problem. But as far as from what I understand of what they're using, there's two different kinds. You can have them ground up when they're at ambient temperature, and they can be frozen and ground up. I don't know if that has anything to do with it. I know those are different kinds, but as far as my knowledge, they still are used they haven't changed the supply. It's regular car tires from manufacturers, and they're once they take them off, they send them down there, they grind them up, they reuse them, they send it back out. So that's a very unusual problem, but I'd be very interested to figure out if you ever figure out what caused it. I'd be really interested to know what happened.
Another thing to kind of piggyback with that is the evolution and the improvement from the early Astro days back in Houston to what we have now. Even just the last 10 years, there have been so many changes from even just the 4 or 5 years from when Creekside was built to when Homefield was built. The difference in the construction process. There have been developments that have improved. They found that, man, this doesn't work, so we're not going to use this anymore. We use this now instead of that. So the process is continually evolving and improving. So that I'm with these guys. That's very unique, very interesting.
Mike asked, will a game get canceled if a rip near home plate? Which home plate do you recommend, Hollywood style or wood block? Interesting question. Yeah, I hope there's never a rip near home plate. Although early on when we first got here, there were some issues with the batters boxes that were Velcroed in place. They did roll up a couple of times, and we dealt with that by just gluing down that section of the replaceable batters box, between the home plate and third base. As far as the home plate, one thing we saw that the home plate style that's 100% rubber and has kind of the honeycomb bottom to it, where there's no wood, that seemed to just deteriorate pretty quickly. I'm not sure if it's the temperatures around the synthetic turf, but it deteriorated more quickly in that synthetic turf situation than it did in dirt. The wood block style was similar. The wood started to rot. So we haven't, our jury's still out on that. We haven't found the home plate that really lasts. We're still replacing them about every year.
Annual.
Yep. The question about type of glue. I'm not an expert on glue. We're learning pretty quickly, but from what I know, there are glues for different temperatures. There are glues for different levels of moisture. And so I think that's the thing you have to ask yourself. Are you going to be gluing when it's cold in the wintertime? Are you going to be gluing where there's a lot of moisture? So I would just talk to glue manufacturers and figure it out. One thing we learned the hard way on glue is that it tends to expand rapidly if it's not clamped. So some of those pictures you saw of us replacing the first base carpet, you see we had boards and blocks on those boards. most of these glues will expand when exposed to moisture, which can, they can expand a half an inch if you let them. So they really need to be clamped in place so you don't see that expansion.
That was one of the things that we did at the conference last year, was go around and we specifically went to the glue manufacturers. What are you using? What's your pros and cons? And we tried different epoxies and different things, and it boiled down to what Jody was talking about: temperature, the cost, the drying time, moisture, a lot of things that we take into what we deal with here in our location of Kansas City is not going to be the same that you would use in Oregon or the sweltering heat of Atlanta. So I think it's going to be an individualized thing.
Those are all great questions. This has been fun.
Well, we appreciate our knowledgeable panelists. I think this is definitely going to be a presentation to attend. I think everybody's looking forward to it when we get to Daytona. Once again, this will be presented on Tuesday, January 23rd from 3:30 to 5 p.m. And yeah, great questions. I think this momentum is going to continue and carry over to Daytona. I think this is going to be exciting to hear the rest of the information. So thank you very much, panelists. And this video recording will be available on our website in the January issue of News Online.
Look forward to seeing everybody in Daytona. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. You got me. You one-upped me.
We'll bring our glasses to Daytona.
I'm going to be looking for those in Daytona.
Oh, you can count on it.
Thank you, everyone.